Hey neighbor, welcome back to 7 on Sunday. This week I'm counting down 7 bands that effectively ended their recording career with one final album, even if they didn't intend that to necessarily be their last album. Heads were already rolling at the thought of these iconic groups splitting up or becoming a touring-only band, but to take it a step further, most of these endings were not on positive terms, whether it be death or disillusionment. Remember, anyone on this list could technically put out another album, but at this point, it's leaning the way of impossible, so I'll focus more on the albums themselves instead of the entire band history, and I'll give a personal rating to each as we go. The Beach Boys released 29 studio albums in their career. I haven't even come close to hearing all of those, but I have heard their final album, That's Why God Made the Radio, many times because I kind of have a deep connection to them that I don't really think I've talked about before. My parents were super strict when it came to what I was and wasn't allowed to listen to, but one artist they deemed appropriate was the Beach Boys. They gave me one of their greatest hits CDs as a present when I was probably 9 or 10, and that was the first album that was ever mine. Anyways, given how mind-numbingly bad the Beach Boys were in the 80s, there's a clear difference between Rock Bottom and That's Why God Made the Radio. It's totally inoffensive and completely okay, which I guess you could print that and put it as the quote that goes on the sticker for the physical copy. It's certainly a self-aware slice of sunshine, but it's primarily Brian Wilson leading the way, which is fine with me because Brian over Mike Love any day. Getting David Marks back was a much-needed win that really elevates the vocal chemistry. The harmonies are on point. Yes, it's polished up and mostly risk-free, but songs like the title track and Shelter definitely have a way of making you smile. The album's final moments, Pacific Coast Highway and Summer's Gone, set the bar so high, with such an infectious level of hopefulness despite everything that they've seen throughout the years and having aged. So keep the tissues on standby if you're feeling extra nostalgic as you listen. Remember, it's not goodbye, it's just see you in the sunset. Linkin Park are the newest band on this list, and as most of you know, vocalist Chester Bennington is no longer with us, and a massive irreplaceable star faded from Linkin Park's universe, meaning it would take some serious cosmic aligning for another album to happen without him.
No tours, there's no music, there's no albums in the pipeline, okay? So just keep in your minds that is not happening.
One More Light dropped in May 2017 to an overwhelmingly negative response from critics and the majority of fans. Certain moments were cherry-picked as highlights, but I don't think most sane people are listing this as Linkin Park's best album. Even if you dig the overtly poppy and out-of-pocket elements, you have to admit that this record's pretty threadbare. And to me, threadbare can also mean overly cluttered, which tends to happen when you hire way too many A-list mainstream songwriters to kind of gentrify your sound. I will, however, run up that hill to defend One More Light for having heart. Good intentions live here, whether it's Mike's vulnerability, Brad's unique guitar layering, or Chester facing his demons head-on in his final year. You can still feel the fist-in-the-air frustration Talking to Myself brings. The title track is extremely well written, and it's a very emotional ballad, and Halfway Right nails the electronic simplicity. Good stuff can be found with a little patience and maybe a metal detector, but if this is their final full-length album, that's 110% their choice, and I respect that. The Police are so synonymous to music that you'd swear they were together for decades, with at least a dozen albums to their name, but no, you're wrong. Look under your seats, because there's F's for everyone. They only made 5 albums and then that was it. Egos can be deceitful beasts, and in the case of their frontman Sting, a successful solo career felt more important than the Police, with the other 2/3 of the trio, Andy Summers and Stuart Copeland, increasingly getting the shaft when it came to writing. In 1985, Every Breath You Take became their biggest hit ever, topping charts globally, subsequently making the Police one of the biggest bands in the entire world, right as they were on the verge of splitting. Synchronicity is an airtight record with a whole lot of jams, and that's coming from a guy who is absolutely not a fan of the majority of their catalog. But the change of pace the trio saddled up for on their final ride, maybe they went a little out there with some of the world music stuff and the metric ton of synths, But honestly, they landed way more hits than misses. The Police's fifth record is essential listening for any fan of rock or pop. Synchronicity 1 oozes synth rock bliss, the mythical Miss Gradinko jangles its way into your heart, and King of Pain is so damn suave, I can't help but praise it as the album's best moment. The strutting guitars, the thought-provoking lyrics, the backing vocals, the knocking synths and the verses perched over Sting's warm voice, it's perfection. LP5 gets held back by the somewhat tepid instrumentation, especially in the back half, but it's almost always worth another listen because the Police were almost always ahead of their time, even if the decade that it was released in is obvious.
It's louder than words, this thing that we do, louder than words.
Back it up! Back it up right on over here, because I'm neither here to drop a hate bomb nor to praise the Endless River as some sort of misunderstood fairy tale ending. Instead, I'm the guy that's lost somewhere in between. 20 years passed from the release of The Division Bell to The Endless River in 2014. Roger Waters was long gone at this point, and it was up to David Gilmour to assemble what he promised would be their final full album. Richard Wright is credited posthumously for his work on the keyboards and various instrumental arrangements and some backing vocal snippets, and given that he passed away 6 years before Endless River even saw the light of day, I think it's a good thing that Pink Floyd put a bookend on the album discography. 4 sides with multiple parts make up the entire track list, as The Endless River is almost entirely instrumental, save for a few samples, with only the illustrious closer Louder Than Words featuring lead vocals from Gilmour. Other than the incredible Part 3, sides 4 through 7 in particular, the rest of the album can't help but pale a bit in comparison, and things definitely dip down into Sleepy Town more than once. But come on, they could have done so much worse. And honestly, I'm glad they gave a final resting place to some of these song ideas they'd had orbiting the band for decades.
This is how we feel.
What a fucking headache of an album I really didn't want to hear again, but I had to refresh my memory for the sake of this video because everybody knows if you're making a list of career-ending albums, Cut the Crap has to be there, or else they literally come and take you to jail. Frontman Joe Strummer's ego was so large by the mid-80s, his head probably looked like something out of an Airheads commercial. He fired 2 members in the years following the release of Combat Rock in 1982, including guitarist Mick Jones, who was almost single-handedly responsible for their punk rock sound. But hey, come on, we still got Paul on bass, and of course Joe Strummer too. Let's hire some randos and have the audacity to call our last album Cut the Crap when it should have been called Rotting Carcass Shits Itself on the Way to 80s Music Hell, which is really just getting stuck in an elevator while Dictator plays on a loop. Are you sensing some hostility? Good. You can't call it going out in a ball of fury if you're nothing more than an ice cream truck flipped over on its side pathetically melting away in the sun. I love London Calling, give them enough rope rules, and I'm even okay with Combat Rock because one of their best hits ever is there. But Cut the Crap? Give me a break, Strummer. See me after class.
Well, next time they stab you, don't fight back, just play the victim instead of playing the fool.
Nothing about the White Stripes was ever typical. Their story of will they or won't they be siblings or married, the hypnotizing peppermint patterns, all of it was surreal for the decade they existed, so it's only fitting that they went out on their weirdest note yet. Weird definitely doesn't mean bad, and as much flack as certain kinds of Jack White fans give this album, they are wrong and they can rot in bad music takes purgatory. Icky Thump is thoughtful, bluesy, and driven. It's the essence of a duo in their prime, which only made it that much more shocking when they closed the book of the White Stripes and broke up, but not before unearthing one last treasure. From primitive garage rock to more abstract bursts of power, their journey on album 6 feels lived in and comfortable as hell. Tracks like A Martyr for My Love for You paint this love-torn portrait of a relationship on the rocks, while our eccentric title track Icky Thump shows out with political takedowns that still ring true. It's probably the topsy-turvy whiplash between energies in the tracklist that pushes some people away, but that's a huge part of what attracts me to it. In fact, I rank it just behind Elephant for their best records, and I love how we can go from back-to-back Celtic fever dreams to moody blues at the drop of Jack's hat. Check out Little Cream Soda, 300 Mile Per Hour, and Bone Broke if you're looking to dive under the waves a little bit. The Stripes really did say farewell with grace, even if it wasn't intended to be their last album.
One a lucky number, ask my Dino.
I'm running competition like a flamethrower. My rhymes age like wine as I get older.
Rap rockers the Beastie Boys topped the list at number 1. And I have to say, me and this highly innovative, highly successful band definitely got off on the wrong foot because I just wasn't into the stuff they played to death on the radio back in the day. Stuff as in Intergalactic and Brass Monkey. Hype started building in the early 2010s as the crew began unloading what would become their final studio album, Hot Sauce Committee Part 2. I saw the video for Make Some Noise on Fuse, and it was that song that turned my head and completely won me over. The tragic death of MCA in 2012 obviously meant the end of the group, because as this album's best moments confirm, there is no Beastie Boys without Adam Yauch. Warbling synths line the corners of the seething okay, while Too Many Rappers turns into a witty critique that brings Nas along for one of their best songs ever. Here's a little something for you, spins like a classic hip-hop joint, and you can't deny the dub meets Bowie chemtrails that are floating over Don't Play No Games. Santa Gold's feature fits like a glove, and that song just sounds so good. Special shout out to Funky Donkey for being fresh to death while sounding like something from a Beck album. Experimental genre-bending production has always been their staple, and this self-made LP is definitely no exception. They lean hard into abstract beats to inject fans with nostalgia for their early material, but the way MCA, Ad Rock, and Mike D tear through with clever twists of phrase after all this time, they went out on top, and we should definitely be happy that if it had to end somewhere, it was Hot Sauce Committee Part 2 and not The Mix-Up. Thanks so much for watching this episode of 7 on Sunday. Please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new in town. If you want to see more episodes of the show, then tap this playlist right here, or tap here for last week's episode. All of my socials can be found in the description, and I'll be back soon with more on ARTV.